and would now like to give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Mr. President. We would like to thank the Special Envoy of the Secretary General for Yemen, Hans Grundberg, and the Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, Mr. Tom Fletcher. We thank them for informative briefings. We also listen very closely to the representative of the civil society, Ms. Samar Nasser. The situation in Yemen continues giving rise to serious concern. The internal political and the socio-economic instability continue against a background of a considerable risk that active hostilities may resume. The number of armed incidents along the front line has gone up, and any such incident could become an uncontrolled clash. The country is feeling lack of foodstuffs, medicines, and fuel. There are power outages, and there is a growing inflation, which leads to rising prices. All of this compounds the everyday difficulties ordinary Yemenis feel. The number of people who are in need of humanitarian assistance is at a critically high level. It's almost 20 million people. Another problem that's remaining is insufficient funding for the humanitarian response plan, and the already paltry resources of the UN in this country are dwindling very rapidly. To date, the issue having to do with the UN and humanitarian staff detained by Ansar Allah is unresolved. But the main reason for the worsening situation on the ground, as well as for the undermining of humanitarian efforts, the main reason for that is a lack of progress on the political track. We still see no alternative to resuming a sustainable negotiating process following the roadmap for the Yemeni settlements. The provisions of this have to be endorsed as binding agreements between warring parties. What is important is to make sure that work continues to create the conditions for a fully fledged inclusive dialogue, including all of the Yemeni protagonists, including Ansar Allah. We do support the mediation efforts made by Envoy Grundberg. It's important to make sure that we do not lower our level of attention to organizing negotiations between countries, as well as towards stimulating small steps aimed at strengthening interaction between them on practical issues. This is the only line that could lead us to sustainable peace. Further stagnation of the situation could result in large-scale destabilization, deteriorating situation in the region as a whole. Mr. President, the internal problems in Yemen are accompanied by the also difficult situation in the nearby marine areas. After several months of relative calm, unfortunately, we're witnessing renewed attacks on commercial vessels in the Red Sea. We condemn the most recent incidents, which resulted in a loss of life, and we express condolences to their families and wish a speedy recovery to the injured. Russia does not accept any action which threatens the safety of crews, cargo, and also threatens the freedom of international navigation. And we urgently call on avoiding such steps and restoring the calm in the waters of Yemen. Another very alarming point here is continued confrontation between Israel and Ansar Allah. There are increasing strikes against the territory of the Jewish state, including civilian objects, and also the disproportionate attacks by Western Jerusalem against the territory of sovereign Yemen. For example, in the early hours of the 7th of July, Israel had a massive strike using missiles and bombs on entities in Hodeidah, and Hodeidah is the area through which most of the vital goods arrive in the country. Civilian infrastructure entities were struck, including the ports of Hodeidah, Salifa, Ras Isa, and a power station, Ras Katif. The Galaxy Leader vessel was critically injured, and the fragments of this strike hit the Sia tanker in Ras Isa, and Russian sailors were on board of that vessel. We do not support the strikes against Israel, but would like to underscore that such disproportionate actions on the part of Western of Jerusalem are unacceptable and could lead to the most severe of consequences. What we need to do is to make sure that the vicious circle of violence is broken. Mr. President, nor can we ignore the obvious link between what's being done by Ansar Allah and the continued military operation by Israel in Gaza. It is the action by West Jerusalem which resulted in a growing number of victims amongst the Palestinians that trigger the escalation of the conflict and broaden its geography to the entire Middle East. Continued plight of the civilian Palestinians results in the reaction on the part of the Arab Street and a number of regional players, including the Houthi movement. The only way of stopping the spiral of violence has been and always is, of course, an immediate and unconditional ceasefire in Gaza, and also restoring unimpeded humanitarian access for the UN throughout the Gaza Strip, as is required by the numerous decisions passed by the Security Council and the GA. This is the only way that we can expect that there will be a normalization of the regional situation, including Yemen and surrounding waters. Mr. President, against this background, keeping the UN presence in Yemen is something that's taking on special importance. And this is a task that's being successfully implemented by the UN mission in Hodeidah. For many years, it's been a stabilizing factor on the ground, helps de-escalate the situation surrounding the ports on the Red Sea and making sure that they remain civilian in nature. They continue monitoring the Stockholm agreements. They support interaction between parties through the UN Redeployment Coordination Committee. And most importantly, the work done by the UN there helps maintain a minimal level of interaction with the opposite parties. And this is of key importance at a minimum to make sure there's unimpeded humanitarian access. And therefore, extending the mandate of the mission at this stage is a necessary step, which would enable us to hope that this way we will be able to prevent an inevitable deterioration of this situation. I thank you.
$25 करोड़ गरीब गरीबी को परास्त करके बाहर निकले.
For the good of our nation, let's work together and let's truly make America great again.
The fastest news breaks.
Requested PM saying that we will have to speak to Putin and to Zelensky.
The biggest news makers.
The relationship with India is probably the most important bilateral relationship the U.S. will have for the rest of this century.
The capital delivered quite an election result today.
Expert analysis.
The million-dollar question today is how to stop this dance of death.
Ground reports.
I'm standing at the crossroad of the Kumbh Mela. Behind me are more than 100 entry ghats.
Long-form interviews.
Exclusionary politics is reflected in Manipur case as well. You don't bother because this is a small state.
Deep dive into burning issues.
It's often said DRC could be the richest country in the whole world. It's because of what sits underneath.
Why exactly did the US topple the Sheikh Hasina government?
HT videos. We don't just break news, we break it down.